Well, folks, you are very welcome back to what is a particularly special edition of Festival Focus. I'm Tom Lee, as ever. My trusty co-pilot, co-driver, sidekick, call him what you will, is the great man David Mullins. And between us, we're going to shed some light, we hope, we try, over the last few days racing, particularly with an obvious emphasis on what was a stellar weekend in Leopardstown. Just before we get into the nitty-gritty of Leopardstown, don't worry, it's not a merciless plug for our golf equipment. What it is, potentially, is a plug for a horse called Princess Zoe, the crown jewel and the absolute apple of her eye. Her trainer, Tony Mullins, he absolutely loves this mare. Dead heating with a 40-1 shot, David Mullins, in Punchestown last Monday isn't necessarily an obvious stepping stone to the Cheltenham Festival, but that seems to be where Princess Zoe is heading now. If you think back that she was a very serious operator on the flat, memorably winning the Prix du Cadran at Longchamp back in 2020. She's by Jukebox Jury. She's a top-level operator on the flat. Could she do it with hurdles in the way? She's between 16 and 20-1 for the Mares Novices hurdle. That's Princess Zoe.
Yeah, I thought she was good. I seen her in the Curragh a few days beforehand, schooling over hurdles, and she actually jumped a lot better in the Curragh than she had in Punchestown. She travelled a bit keen and got into her hurdles a bit deep, and she kind of wrapped the top bar off a few of them. I think you can mark it up a good bit. Tony and Tom Mullins train very similar, and I just wouldn't be second guessing them on what way they're getting to Cheltenham. They'll normally always improve for being there.
Well, we've mentioned in a few recent calls a trainer in Ireland, John McConnell, who definitely isn't shy in terms of a trip to Cheltenham the odd time. Last Wednesday, he went to Ayr with a young horse called Jackpot the Choisel, who the others, literally, they never saw which way he went, bounced out under Sean Bowen, and he was off, away and gone. McConnell's got Mile Mission for the National Hunt Chase next month. Might he have this horse? I know he's got an entry in the Triumph, but he just might be one for the old Fred Winter, what's now the Boodles Juvenile. He's 20-1 for that race. Does that make even a flicker of appeal?
I thought Jackpot the Choisel's first run over hurdles, I don't think that was good enough. Maybe in Fairyhouse he was third behind one of Gordon's horses, and Jesse's came late and caught him for second. I didn't think that was a very strong race, and just looking at Ayr, how easily he won, I didn't think he was sprinting up the straight. I don't think he's for me. Possibly if he gets a nice mark in the Boodles. It is a very open race, as always is. But yeah, he's not really one for me, I'm afraid.
Okay, fair enough. Let's, in which case, take the gloves off and get into Leopardstown, because 2 days running, the crowds were there, the stars were there, and the performances lived up to it. Of course, there were some high-profile flops. We'll deal with those. But there were some headline displays also. Early on the card on the Saturday, Good Land and Absolute Notions there at Leopardstown. The 1-2 in the opening race of the Dublin Racing Festival. The 7-year-old Good Land made all to win at the same track at the end of December. And Good Land was backing up that performance readily here, racing freely, always doing enough. And if you think that the owner-trainer Barry Connell and young jockey Mikey O'Sullivan, not only have they got a good one on their hands with this guy, but the stable, of course, have got Marine Nationale potentially for the Supreme Novice as well. But dealing with Good Land, first of all, he's between 5 and 6-1 for the Ballymore, a race for which the 2 years younger runner-up also on Saturday, who I mentioned in the intro, Absolute Notions, could also feature in, because he has a range of prices. He's 20-1 best, but some firms have him chalked up as short as 8-1. That's Absolute Notions, who did stay on quite nicely into second. Would either of those two, Good Land or Absolute Notions, strike you as having the potential to pose a threat to the big two in the betting there? I'm talking about Hermes Allen. I'm talking about Ampere Pass, who we've covered in recent weeks. That's Good Land and Absolute Notions. Yeah,
Good Land was a very good and professional winner. Barry Connell, he's a force to be reckoned with now. He's been very, very strong on his two horses. His interviews genuinely felt like he thought he has the two novice hurdles won in Cheltenham already nearly. Good Land was very impressive. As I said, he is that good bit older now, and he gave him the time. I think that's really standing to the horse. As we've seen with Absolute Notions, the one thing I picked out from the race was Davy Russell was never happy. He was never on the bridle once. Definitely needs the Albert Bartlett trip. He probably need to be freshened up a bit because it's very hard to go around Cheltenham off the bridle. It's one thing to keep in mind with him. But good land. I do think he has a proper chance in the Ballymore.
Intriguing. Right, moving swiftly on. A very, very eventful race for the Spring Juvenile was won in the end by Gala Marceau, who's now 4 or 5 to 1 for the Triumph Hurdle, depending on where you shop around, having reversed Christmas form with a certain Lossiemouth. Now, this wasn't without its talking points, I think it's fair to say, because Lossiemouth went so wide, nearly in the car park at one point, got hampered off the bend, ran into interference. Some people afterwards were suggesting that potentially it wasn't the finest hour in a normally absolutely brilliant jockey in terms of riding position, in terms of timing and tactics. But of course, that's coming from people who probably haven't been out there racing at 35 miles an hour, surrounded by horses in the heat of the moment. Nonetheless, Gala Marceau beat Lossiemouth in the Spring Juvenile and looks to be improving at a rate of knots. Would she now rate as the stable's first string for the Triumph, Gala Marceau, or does the number one jockey remain loyal to Lossiemouth, especially given those issues that she encountered pre-race? If you were given the choice, based upon what you saw, which of those two has stronger credentials? The bookies still think Lossiemouth because it's Lossiemouth's 7-4 Triumph favourites, whereas I've mentioned Gala Marceau is still 4 or 5 to 1.
Yeah, I think Paul Townend's going to have a bone to pick with Gala Marceau. If the problem was in that race, the pacemaker, the other Rich Ritchie horse, the grey horse as well, actually fell back in his face, and Paul had to take a pole. He actually nearly clipped heels. That's how quick the pacemaker stopped and had to come around the whole field. Take nothing away from the winner though. She was keen. She was keen at Christmas. She looked to settle a small bit better and be a small bit more professional. Gala Marceau in Dublin Racing Festival, but she was going away again at the line. I think he can mark up both performances, but I think Paul Townend, if you're going to go on the jockeys picks, I think he'll be on her again in Cheltenham.
Yeah, that's the impression I got. Now, moving swiftly on, I'm looking forward to talking about this guy because he's a character, all right. That is El Fabiolo, who's now between 2 to 1 or 9 to 4 second favourite in the market for the Arkle. What on earth to make of this guy? Because choke out always, you feel there's always a thumping, juddering error just around the corner, as surfaced 4 from home at Leopardstown on Saturday. But actually, that's what makes El Fabiolo so watchable, because you just don't quite know what's coming next. He's now a Grade 1 scorer over fences after this Irish Arkle. And I think the key point that's easily forgotten is go back to Aintree in April. He was a next second to John Bon, who hopefully the pair will clash at Cheltenham in a few weeks' time, and who happens, of course, to be the only horse shorter than El Fabiolo in the market for the Arkle itself. And of course, we're going to get to see John Bon hopefully at Warwick on Saturday in the Kingmaker. If they both get there in one piece, God willing they will, which way, based on what we know now, will it swing? Because El Fabiolo is clearly improving. John Bon's obviously very good. Aintree has them linked very close together from last spring. Let me put it this way. Bring you out of retirement, you've got to ride one or the other in the Arkle. Would you like to be on the back of John Bon or El Fabiolo?
I think it'd be John Bon, but the form last year in Aintree with El Fabiolo, I think he would have beaten John Bon if he hadn't have made that mistake or nearly got brought down at the third last. He's obviously an improving horse. His stride is absolutely monstrous. That's his big thing, and that's probably why he's making those few mistakes, trying to sort himself out, because he has such a big stride. Listen, I can't see much between them with the Aintree run, but John Bon looks to finish the Arkle around a tight track like Cheltenham for me. Them fences come at you quick on Tuesday. I think I'd rather be on John Bon.
Rather be on John Bon. You heard it here first. Okay, I am just going to segue very briefly away from Leopardstown, but with good reason, because something potentially very special happened, not just at Leopardstown at the weekend, but in the UK. at Sandown Park, where a horse we've talked about in pretty glowing terms previously strutted his stuff in the Scilly Isles Novices Chase, the Grade 1. That was Gerri Colombe for Jordan Gainford and Gordon Elliott. And do you know, it was funny because on a day where the lack of British representation in Leopardstown drew plenty of comment, it was ironic to see Sandown's big prize go the way, of course, of an Irish stable. Gerri Colombe was brave. He dug in and he was gritty to land the Scilly Isles, headed to out, battling back, bravely mastering the home team. And he remains now unbeaten after 7 starts under rules, which is a fantastic profile. The opinion after the race, David, was split. You got bookies' quotes ranging from between, bizarrely, 5-2 and 7-1 for the longer National Hunt Chase, or more resoundingly, he's 3-1 favourite for the shorter Brown Advisory. I even heard a few little whispers of people who claim to know what they're talking about, saying this guy might one day be Gold Cup material. So obviously that's still to play out. Having watched this display, would either of those prices, National Hunt Chase or indeed the Brown Advisory 3-1, make you want to get involved?
Well, I think with the Brown Advisory, if you thought he was going to go there, you'd know Mighty Potter would go for the shorter trip. I can't see him running the National Hunt Chase, not being if they think he's a Gold Cup horse, which he looks like to me. He looks a small bit green and immature still. He hit the railway fences. He pricked his ears the whole way around. He hasn't really got that sharpness of a grade. I know he's a 2-time Grade 1 winner now, but I think he still needed that another Grade 1 to sharpen up. I think that'll do him the world of good. He's got his head in front. It'll be hard to take him on in the Brown Advisory.
Yeah, I like him. Okay, if there's only one horse I could ask you about, and we could probably do an hour on this lad alone. We're not going to, by the way. Don't fear. But if there's one name on this sheet that I'm looking forward to saying, what do you make of this guy? Explain to me what I've just seen. It is, of course, Galopin Des Champs, who, and you might tell me I'm absolutely barking up the wrong tree here, David Mullins, but correct me if I'm wrong. You're the man who's won graded races. You've won a Grand National. You've been there. You've done it on the very biggest stage. But this, to these eyes, looked a shade workmanlike from the Gold Cup favourite. Yes, he won his Grade 1, and yes, he did quicken up near the line. But workmanlike was the phrase that I was left with. Is that fair or an unfair assessment based upon a display which I thought maybe just gave a glimmer of hope and a little bit of encouragement to potential Cheltenham rivals? And I'll just give you the odds very quickly. I thought this was peculiar, but one bookmaker after the race shortened his price for Cheltenham for the Gold Cup to 5-4. Some left him alone at 6-4. A couple nudged him out to 7-4 and 15-8. That price is now settled at 13-8. You've got to go back 6 years, Sizing John 2017, to find an animal capable, good enough, and able to do the Irish Gold Cup, Cheltenham Gold Cup, same season double. Are you still as confident in this fella based upon what you saw? And am I being unfair?
I'm still very confident in him. I don't think you're being unfair. You're being unfair if you're one of the guys before the race that said, will he get the trip? So now he does. He runs a little bit behind the bridle. He gallops out through the line. He comes off the bridle a bit earlier than he had been. I think it's unfair to say so because of all the people that said, will he get the trip? Now he looks like a horse that wants further. Now he looks like a horse that wants the 3 mile too of Cheltenham.
Yeah.
To me, I think he done exactly what we hoped to see from a Gold Cup horse. He's still my pick anyway. I can't see anything else to beat him.
Are you is there just as much of a wow factor in your mind? Because it was quite an audacious remark. You said to me, listen, this guy's so good and he's held in such high regard that he would be competitive if they ran. I know it was slightly flippant and maybe a bit tongue-in-cheek, but you said you could throw this lad into the world hurdle and he'd nearly beat them. You could put him in a champion hurdle. He's so good, he'd be involved, he'd be competitive. Are you still quite as enthused as you were, or did this maybe just knock a tiny sheen off that resounding recommendation you gave?
Yeah, that took a sheen off of that. People said, would he get the trip in a Gold Cup because he raced so enthusiastically last year? But we've seen it in the John Durkin. Paul was very impressed by him settling so well because he is very flamboyant. He does have those big jumps. He did as a novice. He hadn't got them the last 2 days, but he looked like a more professional character. And from what I'm seeing, he's running through the line every time. So I do have to retract my statement about the champion chase. He looks like a Gold Cup horse now.
All right, well, look, we've come here with a view to trying to find out whether or not he's still your Gold Cup horse, and he is. So we will leave it there. We'll move on to the end of that card at Leopardstown on Saturday because the Grade 2 bumper went the way of an increasingly impressive horse, and that is a 5-year-old by Muhara called A Dream to Share, who now, after wins at Tipperary, at Roscommon, and here at Leopardstown, looks potentially really quite exciting. I love the ride he got, very cool ride by young John Gleeson and his mum Claire Silks. Does this Dream to Share, A Dream to Share, to give him his correct name, strike you as potentially one for the champion bumper on the Wednesday at Cheltenham? The bookies would like you to believe so, because they will only give you, depending on who you visit, 6 or 7 to 1.
He has a lot of speed, A Dream to Share. And I think maybe if Patrick Mullins and Jody Townend had the race back again, Factify looked a bit slow at Christmas, and Chosen Witness looked like he galloped all day down in Limerick. I think they didn't go hard enough, and it gave the flatbred horse, gave it one up on them. Nothing really got into the back, from the back of the field, only this lad. If you're asking me about a champion bumper horse, I think you need to stay with the likes of Fernie Hollows, Appreciated, Relegate, just all those type of horses. They always wanted a trip. Can you see this lad being a 3-mile chaser, or a real staying type? Not really, but it was very impressive. I'd be thinking more Aintree.
Thinking more Aintree, nice problems to have for the Gleesons and for John Kiley down in Dungarvan. Moving swiftly on to Sunday, what a start it was to that Sunday card. Difficult not to be impressed by Mighty Potter, who, don't forget, has now bagged a pair of Grade 1s over hurdles and a pair over fences. He was excellent in the Drinmore, and now he's added this prize on Sunday. Is it fair to say that at this trip, this 2.5, 2 mile 5 kind of trip, seemingly nothing can match him? Nothing seems to have an answer to him. With that in mind, and you might disagree with that, but if you agree with that, is he therefore verging on banker material for the Turner Novices chase in about 5 weeks' time? Because, again, the bookies would like to believe so. They go no bigger right now than 6 to 4 about Mighty Potter for the Turner.
Yeah, Mighty Potter is seriously impressive. He was very good in the Drinmore. Remember, he stumbled a couple of times on landing in the Drinmore. He didn't do it in Leopardstown, but Leopardstown is a big, flat, galloping track. I know Fairyhouse is too, but maybe just the sheer size of him. And Cheltenham did catch him out last year. You'd just wonder, is he banker material on that? But he is an absolute beast. There's no doubt about it. But he is a monster. He is about 17 hands. He's huge. And I'd say he'll probably be a better horse next year. You'd be really looking forward to himself and Galloping the Champ clashing in a John Durkin someday. I think he has that ability. Whether it's this year or not, I don't know. But he's a proper one.
A proper one, Mighty Potter. Moving swiftly on, a result that we perhaps didn't anticipate came when Gentleman de May beat Blue Lord on Sunday. Now, this leaves us with an increasingly open and frankly quite muddling pot of names for the Queen Mother Champion chase, a pot which got another stir in this Grade 1 Dublin chase. The long odds on Blue Lord was reported to have run flat by Paul Townend, and if that meant the door was opened ajar, well, it was kicked off its hinges, quite frankly, by Gentleman de Mee, who ironically himself was reported as running flat in his previous appearance, but they then said he loved the drying ground on this occasion. Let's not forget, I can think back a couple of years ago, Gentleman de Mee, the whispers were he was potentially a very special talent in his own right. And let's not also forget that go back to Aintree in April, he beat Edwardstone, the same Edwardstone who's challenging favourite for this year's race, but currently has a bruised foot reported by his trainer, and just a minor niggle in his preparation for the big race in a few weeks' time. But based on the evidence we saw on Sunday, does Blue Lord now get discarded and thrown out? Are the bookies correct to lengthen his Queen Mother Champion chase odds to as big as 9 to 1? And with Gentleman Demi, who ironically is also now 9-1, is he now inserted into this really tricky equation when you think we've got Energumene, Edwardstone, Editor de G, Blue Lord, now Gentleman Demi. Does he belong in that conversation, in that group of names at single figure odds, or is it an overreaction?
No, it's not an overreaction at all. He's 9-1 for a champion chase. That should be his price. He beat Edwardstone in entry. He won another grade one, I think, last year in Punchestown. He is a proper horse. I have a funny feeling that this guy possibly doesn't show what he's capable of early season because he's so keen at home. David Casey rides him out every day, and it's very hard to work a horse or put him through his paces when they are that keen, or else you could blow the heads off them. So you kind of have to run them to get them fit, in my opinion. And I seen him over in Sandown for the Tingle Creek, and he looked big and robust, and he was very on edge before the race. It's great to see him settling a small bit better. I thought he was always going to improve. I didn't think he was up to beating Blue Lord as comfortable as he did. But you know, if we're going to sit here and pretend that we're going to sort out the champion chase today, I don't think so. It's so wide open. There's question marks over them all. I think it's going to be a brilliant race, but we're not going to figure it out.
Well, a week or two ago, you said, and you were hesitating, you said, given the chance after the Clarence House, you just about, because of the training talents of Willie Mullins and his amazing ability to recuperate a horse and bring them back even better than before, you'd probably just about want to put your leg over Energumene. Is that still the case? Would you still say that if you were forced to choose one right now to ride? I know it's 5 weeks away. Much can change, and undoubtedly much will change. But if I forced you to pick a name now and stick to it, which one would be your ride?
I'd probably have to say Energumene still. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I suspect another horse you wouldn't mind riding out the same stable is called State Man, who won at Leopardstown on Sunday. This was very much had the feeling of a changing of the guard moment, really, because State Man comfortably, I think it's fair to say, seeing off the Wonder Mare Honeysuckle and Vauban to land the Grade 1 Irish Champion Hurdle. His 4th top level prize in 4 starts. So Grade 1, Grade 1, Grade 1, Grade 1, all inside 10 months. And for a 6-year-old who's barely got any miles on the clock, what makes it all the more meritorious is that go back to last March and he won the county hurdle. And I think it's probably understandable that he's now 11-4. There is a little hint of 3-1 around, depending if you can be trawling around the various institutions. But 11-4 is the price. State Man for the champion hurdle, behind only the mighty Constitution Hill. Let me put it this way, because much can and does change. And I'll ask you separately about Honeysuckle, but it looks as if she's now not banging the drum for the champion, but going into the shallower mares race, which seems to make sense. With that in mind, is State Man the only legitimate threat? And does he have the quality to trouble the favourite Constitution Hill come the big day on the 15th of March?
Yeah, it was very. I thought Honeysuckle had this. I thought this was going to be a place where she was going to shine. Obviously, it didn't happen. I was a bit deflated after it. But State Man, he's done nothing wrong, as you said. I know they were very sweet on him for the county hurdle. I couldn't believe what sort of a price he was last year, lining up in it. You're going to have to take him on. You're going to have to take Constitution Hill on with this guy. Constitution Hill has beaten Ep.14. I think State Man has beaten Ep.14 as well as Constitution Hill would beat Honeysuckle. So I think they're a lot closer matched than they should be. I still have to say Constitution Hill is probably a bit ahead, but State Man, he's doing nothing wrong, and you know Willie Mullins horses when they get to Cheltenham.
Yes, indeed. Another Willie Mullins horse almost certainly going to Cheltenham, and another Willie Mullins horse who last March was very heavily backed for a handicap. The difference being State Man won his, Gaelic Warrior did not, foiled by Brazil in the Fred Winter Boodles. Plenty said going into Sunday, running in another handicap off 143, carrying a huge weight, 11 stone 12, that he wouldn't be up to it. Oh boy, was he up to it, Gaelic Warrior. And actually, it was intriguing, a point that didn't get made. You remember the delayed Clonmel race that he won. That, of course, meant that he could race off his old mark plus a penalty in Newbury in the coming weekend in the Betfair hurdle. So they were passing up an opportunity to run there to win a big prize in Britain, to win this, which I thought was intriguing. But now we know why, because he did it very nicely, Gaelic Warrior. Bookies instantly sliced him to 4 or 5 to 1 for the Supreme Novice on the first day. Off the back of winning a handicap, it's an unconventional route, but it seems to be working for Gaelic Warrior. Would those prices, 4 or 5 to 1 for the Supreme, be justified in your mind, David?
No, I don't like grade one horse or handicaps coming into grade ones, but Gaelic Warrior last year, for me, he had the winning of the Boodles. He threw it away by jumping slightly right and landing flat-footed at the back of the last, gave Brazil his chance to come and beat him. He done that again on Sunday in Leopardstown. He did jump a long way right. For me, I can't see him. No, he's not for me at all for a Supreme Novice. Definitely not. If you jump 3 sections wider than where your jockey asked you to line up for the hurdle, you won't be. I don't think you'd be walking back into the winners' enclosure.
Sure. Finally, and it is a bumper edition, so thanks for sticking with us, but she's definitely worth a mention. The incredible weekend's racing brought to a close in the Grade 2 Mares bumper by the brilliantly named Fun, for whom it must have been exactly that to be riding her, because she won by 9.5 lengths. It could have been further. This was quite a jump up from winning at Sligo back in October. And if she goes to Cheltenham, of course, on that occasion, she'll have to try and do it against the boys. But at between 6 and 8 to 1, she has only It's For Me and the horse we just spoke about, A Dream to Share, ahead of her in the anti-post market for the champion bumper. You said A Dream to Share might be more suited to Aintree rather than Cheltenham. Therefore, is Fun perhaps a more realistic Cheltenham bumper player?
It was a good performance if you watch her from the wings of the second last, but she was very keen the whole way up the straight. Patrick obviously knew that. He dropped her well in. There wasn't much pace, and she's probably one of the first horses off the bridle down the back, going through maybe the wings of the third last or crossing the road. She was very in and out. She must be still very green. Patrick was saying in his interviews after that he couldn't do the weight on her for Cheltenham, so he'd like her to go to Aintree. But I don't know what way that's going to work. Maybe he has another few bullets to fire for Cheltenham. I don't know, but I can see this one going to Aintree definitely. They done it with a good few other mares. Ashrow Diamond last year. I think she kind of strikes me as one of those types.
Well, that's intriguing, because if It's For Me actually was thinking, are we going to take on A Dream to Share? Are we going to take on Fun? Perhaps in many ways, we've yet to see the horse that will come out and surprise us, or perhaps all of these arguments only strengthen the case for It's For Me. David Mullins, you know the drill by now. It is tradition that I'm going to shorten it this week and say your performance of the weekend with respect to Jackpot and with respect to Princess Zoe. The weekend, the names in the frame: Gala, Marceau, El Fabiolo, Gerri, Colombe, Galopin des Champs, A Dream to Share, Mighty Potter, Gentleman de May, State Man, Gaelic Warrior. Fun. Performance of the weekend from David Mullins.
Has to be State Man. He's lowered Honeysuckle's flag again. It has to be State Man for me.
There you go. I would have bet the 101 in running that Mighty Potter was going to come off the tip of your tongue, and completely foiled and dropped the shoulder and comes out with State Man. Folks, that's it for this week. Festival Focus over and out. Thank you very much for your time and attention. If you've enjoyed it, as ever, tell your friends, spread the word. If you think we've missed anything out, leave a comment beneath. And if you think we've got anything wrong, leave a comment beneath. This is a democracy. Have your say. We'll be back. John Bond to come at Warwick this weekend. There's bound to be loads to talk about. See you next week.